Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll get started in a few moments. We're just going to let some time pass so everybody can get in the room. So thank you so much for joining us. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Wow, we have so many amazing people from all over the country. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. You are here at Building a Better America, a small business resource and community webinar with the SBA and PPSI. My name is Renee Johnson, and I am a senior advisor here with PPSI. And we are so excited to be in this celebration as we are talking about Black History Month and small businesses. But first, before we get into the program, we want to do a little housekeeping. If you have any questions, we're not asking you to type it into the chat today. We would love for you to use the Q&A function. So if you see that Q&A, please use that to type all your questions there. Additionally, the U.S. Small Business Administration does not endorse Public-Private Strategies Institute. This is being live streamed and recorded. So you will get a copy of this recording if you, in fact, were able to register. If not, check out Facebook and the SBA's Facebook page. We ask also in the Q&A function that you do not share your personal information. This is not here for you to put your personal information. We want to make sure that if you have questions that are general, that you're able to put them there and that we're able to answer them at that time. So today, this conversation, we're going to talk about three main things: the historic context of Black History Month in small business, the SBA priorities in equity and procurement, and finally, an overview of government contracting 101. And with that, I'm so excited. You all seen him, you love him, Mr. Richard Fowler, who is a TV and radio host. Richard Fowler currently serves as a progressive contributor to Fox News, joining in September 2016. In this role, Fowler provides political and cultural analysis across Fox News channels, daytime and primetime programming, as well as the network's Sunday media analysis program, Media Buzz with Howard Kurtz. Fowler is the host of the nationally syndicated Fowler Show and is the co-founder of the Richard Media Company, a boutique communication and messaging firm that serves foundations, nonprofits, and helps brands better tell their stories and millennial audiences. And with that, I'm so excited to introduce to you the amazing Richard Fowler.
Thank you so much, Renee. I appreciate that introduction. I mean, listen, she sounds like a sports announcer. You got to give her some credit for that. It's so amazing to be here with the Small Business Administration, as well as the Public-Private Strategies Institute. And I got to tell you, when I think about small businesses and I think about the role that government plays in uplifting small businesses, especially as we celebrate the closing week of Black History Month, I'm happy to be part of this conversation because let me tell you, I am a small business owner. The Richard Media Company, me and my business partner started out, and our first contract was a government contract from the District of Columbia, and which really speaks to the power that government contracts has in empowering the Black community. I also live in the District of Columbia, and when I think about government contracts and think about the role that they play in uplifting and empowering our communities, I would be remiss if I didn't think about former mayor, or mayor for life, as we call him here in Washington, D.C., Marion Barry. And there's so many amazing, colorful stories about the former mayor. But one of the best stories he would always say is when contracts would come into his office and they would say, Mr. Mayor, we want to take out a contract to pick up trash in the District of Columbia. And he would always say, if you don't have a Black subcontractor, if you don't have a Black person at the table, you cannot pick up Black people's trash in the District of Columbia. And as a result of that, as a result of his action, as a result of his push to ensure that there were more Black businesses at the table. He built a middle class, and beyond the middle class, he created small businesses that are no longer small businesses. Now they're large, multi-million-dollar businesses. And he wasn't the only mayor that did that. The other mayor that comes to mind is Mayor Jackson of Atlanta. Same thing. If you want to do business in Atlanta, if you want to build the world's busiest airport in Atlanta, guess what? You have to do that with Black contractors. And here's what both Mayor Jackson and Marion Barry understood, is that African Americans are just as qualified, they're just as good, and sometimes in many cases, they're even better than the folks that are coming to the table to apply for contracts. Now, we could go down the history and talk about the role that the SBA has played, as well as the role that various government entities have played to ensure our businesses have a seat at the table. But even from the start of it, in 1810, the African American Insurance Company was created, and that was created in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And the push for that was this idea that we've got to do everything in our power in the North, even before we stopped enslaving in this country, to give Black people the power, and people of color for that matter, the resources and the tools that they need so that they can empower their community. And for all of the folks on this call, you guys know better than I. When you guys are given a government contract, that money goes right back into our communities, because the first thing you're going to do is you're likely going to hire a person of color to work at your company. The next thing that you're going to do when you get that government contract is you might urge one of the folks who work at your company, right? One of your employees to start their own business and become one of your subcontractors, right? And then that subcontractor is going to encourage one of their employees to become a subcontractor. And as a result of that, we can create legacies of economic viability for our community. We see it here in the nation's capital. We also see it here. We see it in Atlanta. We see it anytime people decide that they're going to bet on African American small businesses. They're always betting on winners, because we already know that we're the most qualified to do the job. But oftentimes there are so many inherent barriers that are in the way of us being able to do said job. So as we sit here and we approach Black History Month 2022, I think while there's so much that we are still fighting for, right? And there's still so much that we're fighting against, we have to take a moment to pride ourselves in this. All across this great country, we have some amazing, brilliant, bold, prolific, innovative entrepreneurs who have decided to create their own businesses. And one of the things that have helped them create that business is the fact that they can apply for a government contract. And the fact that not only can they apply for a government contract, but oftentimes not only do they apply, but they end up winning those contracts. And when they win those contracts, not only do they create generational wealth for themselves, but they create generational wealth for their entire communities. And that generational wealth is what will continue to help move this community forward. And beyond moving this community forward, let's be real, that's what's actually going to move America forward. As we become a more diverse and a more inclusive country, it's going to require us to create more innovation, and it's going to require us to build more small businesses. And these small businesses start with all 751 of you guys on this amazing Zoom, and ladies, on this amazing Zoom chat today, and figuring out how we can all work together to do the business of the federal, state, and local government. In order to make our communities economically viable, we have to double down on government contracts for small, medium, and large businesses for people of color, and those that are owned by people of color. My own personal story, which what makes this story so unique, is that even in our own community, even in the Black community, there's so much diversity. Both my parents are from Jamaica, and my mom, well, the story goes, and she tells it better than I do, but the story goes, she came to this country with a suitcase and $100 bill as a registered nurse from the island of Jamaica, and now her son sits on national television. But one of the reasons for that was because when I graduated college after the Great Recession, and I decided to create my communications firm, we were allowed and we were afforded the ability to bid on a city contract in the District of Columbia. And we won that contract. And as a result of winning that contract, we were able to start our company with a contract and with money in our pockets. We were able to hire people. We were able to subcontract other vendors, right? And we were also able to understand the inner working of government. And as a result of that, now our company has tons of clients. And we're almost oversubscribed with clients as a result of our first client, which was the District of Columbia government. So I guess I'm here today, not as a testimonial, not to brag or not to boast, but I'm here to say this: everybody on this call is what makes this country great. But in order for this country to continue to be great, we need you, number one, to continue to apply for government contracts. And number two, we need to make sure that the government continues issuing those contracts. And so that's why I'm happy to be here with the amazing folks from SBA, as well as some of my amazing colleagues from across the industry, to talk about how government contracts have been part of the backbone of ensuring the economic wealth and viability of the African American community, and beyond that, communities of color all across the United States. It's not just Marion Barry in Washington, D.C. anymore, or Mayor Jackson in Atlanta. Now it's the mayors of Chicago, it's the mayors of LA, it's the mayors of Houston, it's the mayors of Richmond, Virginia, it's the mayors of Baltimore, Maryland, it's the mayors of New York City, and of course, it's the federal government, right? All of these entities are saying, we will bet on Black. Not only will we bet on Black, we will double down on that bet. And now it's up to us to ensure that we do everything in our power to not only show them that we are the best and the brightest, because we already knew that was true, but it's to make sure that we bring more and more small business and entrepreneurs to the table so that we can continue to grow the economic viability of our community, and in turn, grow the economic viability of the United States. I want to thank you all so much for joining me. I'll come back for some questions after, but now I want to turn it over. I'm turning it back over to Renee, I believe. But thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Richard. And that was so exciting. Wow. I'm just so like, woo. Well, now we're going to talk about SBA priorities and equity in procurement. And who is going to bring that? None other than Deidre Henry Spries. She is the senior advisor of the Office of the Administrator. And we're so excited to hear from her. Deidre has been selected to serve as the senior advisor for COVID programs to the administrator at the U.S. Small Business Administration. In this role, Ms. Rise has been tasked with improving and enhancing the efficiency of COVID programs for application to award. As such, she's worked closely with the administrator, the White House, Capitol Hill, and stakeholders to ensure that the relief needed by small businesses across the country is made available and accessible. And with that, I'm so excited to introduce to everyone, Deidre.
Hello, everyone. What a pleasure to be with you. Renee, thank you so much for that dynamic introduction. I can't wait to be just eye to eye and face to face with you. There we go. We're almost there. I can't wait till we're looking at each other and can see each other. But it is a pleasure and an honor to be with you. I am Deirdre Henry Spires, just waiting for the visuals to catch up with the sound of my voice so you know who's talking to you. I think we're still on Renee, but we'll flip over to me in just a minute. But in the meantime, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Deirdre Henry Spires, Senior Advisor here at the SBA. I started my role here as the Senior Advisor for COVID programs. I came not quite a year ago in April, when we were really trying to make sure that money was moving out the door in a way that would speed emergency relief to the American public. We found that a lot of our programs had been suffered a little bit in the transition between governments and the handoff. And we had a new administrator. We had Administrator Isabel Casillas Guzman. And she's the woman that hired me and brought me in to help smooth that transition over our COVID programs and moving them out to our public. I was so excited to serve in that role, and I still am. We moved programs like COVID Idle, which we are still moving out the door, still answering your appeals and pleas as we move this money forward. We took the shuttered venues and operators grants to $0 out to the door to presently $14.1 billion out the door for the arts community that had been impacted by COVID. And so I'm just going to pause for a second and ask the controller could you look at the visuals and see if we can get on me so that I am not talking into the abyss. I feel like I'm talking and I can't, you all can't see me. I want to make sure we connect as we start thinking about Black History Month. And I love my sister Renee. She is one of the most energetic and enthusiastic people when it comes to the work we're doing here at SBA. But I know she would like it for you all to be able to see me as I deliver these comments to you today. So that said, we at the SBA are really, really committed to making sure that we serve all American businesses, but particularly businesses that have been disenfranchised, that have not been able to participate in our economy in a way that has been fair, equitable, or just. And so we want all businesses to thrive. And there's this saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. Sometimes we found that that tide starts to rise over the heads of the boats that have been at the lowest rungs of our business access. Instead, we need to start where they are, and then that rising tide lifts all boats. So in this Black History Month, we are really focused on being able to do that work for our community and make sure that each and every business owner has access. Okay, let me just ground you in a couple of statistics that the Urban League, in partnership with the Third Way, put out late last week. They said only 2% of businesses with employees are Black owned, 6% are Hispanic owned, 10% are Asian owned, and 0.4% are American, Indian, and Alaska Native owned. You know that Black people make up about 13% of our population, so only 2%. We are underperforming in the space of business ownership. Another thing that we know is that business ownership and entrepreneurship for the Black community has been the quickest and strongest way out of poverty, bar none. Black and Hispanic female founders receive less than 0.5%, and that's really 0.43%, of total venture capital investment. That means that we are not getting our businesses by Black women and Hispanic women are not being able to be invested in to the degree that others can. Women-owned small businesses only get 5% of federal contracts, and minority-owned businesses only receive 4 to 10%, and that depends on how we're counting by minority. 1/4 of Black and Hispanic-owned businesses are concentrated in one industry. We've got some work to do. We've got some work to do to level this playing field. So what is the Small Business Administration doing about it? What are we at the Small Business Administration doing to help Black-owned businesses? And I want to focus here because it is Black History Month. The SBA is focused on helping small businesses as they face increasingly complex challenges, from increasing gaps in capital access to the rising threats of climate change-induced natural disasters. If you were watching the news lately, remember right around the holidays when we saw wildfires, and then we saw snow on top of smoldering fire as people's homes had burned and then the ashes were covered in snow. It was really just from extreme to extreme. And people need to be able to be resilient in the face of these challenges and build businesses that will be resilient for whatever comes next. Getting emergency economic relief into the hands of those still struggling to rebuild and delivering on the promise of PPP forgiveness. We're also working with the White House and our sister agencies to equitably unlock procurement opportunities for our small manufacturers, suppliers, and service providers to do business with the federal government, including ensuring that all of our small businesses can help build and innovate to deliver on the historic investments in President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law. The other thing that we're working on are some supply chain challenges and wanting to help build supply chain resilience. The SBA will stand up a brand new effort through its Office of Government Contracting and Business Development, focusing on delivering on President Biden's promise of Made in America, Buy in America. You're going to hear a lot about the opportunities and contracting from Tanika from our Office of Government Contracting. She is going to just deliver for you some dynamic words that will ground you in that space. But I want you to know, even beyond that, what the SBA is doing. We are protecting the basic right to vote for all Americans. It's like, what? What does the SBA have to do with that? We are the first federal agency to request designation as a voter agency. So through the SBA's district offices, small business owners and others will have the services they need to ensure their voices are heard at the ballot box and fair representation for their communities. So when you are filling out and asking for help with building your business, you can also register to vote. We're building on the changes we made in 2021 to implement a customer-first, technology-forward, equitable approach. The SBA is strongly positioned to deliver on President Biden's commitment to equity. I am so excited to, and I'm going to tell you a little story. I am really excited to work for someone who takes the challenges that are facing small businesses incredibly seriously, and that is really committed to what it takes to be a small business owner, feels it in the marrow of her bones. We were talking one day, and just recently, and I was we were talking about a news story, and it was a news story about a business owner, a Black business owner, who had a juice bar. And in having said juice bar, she was offered or thinking about getting a PPP loan, and she did not take that loan. And she didn't take the loan because she did not want to be in debt. Well, that's a positive motivation. However, PPP is a forgivable loan. That's good debt, because it's not going to stay a debt, because you're not going to owe that money. And for her, it was so heartbreaking because it was being touted as the right response to a loan program, when for our communities, it's entirely the wrong response. We have to do a lot to educate Black and Hispanic communities, women, veterans, our rural communities about debt. What's good debt, what's bad debt, how to use loans, what's a good loan, what's a bad loan. We've got work to do. And it's not just the work of the SBA, it's the work of all of us. Because like I said, a rising tide lifts all boats. We need this tide to rise together. I've always said, I want to be able to put my neighbor's kid through college with the cup of coffee I buy. I want to go into your business and know that your family is flourishing as a result. We need this to happen in the African American community. We need it to happen across America. We need to support each other and build each other up. This country was founded on the entrepreneurial spirit. It runs through our country's DNA. And we at the SBA are here to support that. One last fact I'll give on our efforts around procurement, and then I'm going to just turn it back over to Renee, so maybe we can have a little further dialogue and then make plenty of space for Tanika to come and share with you. One of the things that we're also doing is federal contracting through our hub zones. Federal contracting is one way in which the government addresses diversity, equity, inclusion, and the wealth gap. Because as the largest purchaser of goods and services in the world, it ensures that small businesses, and particularly those in underserved markets and communities, are provided a fair share of the opportunity to sell their goods and services directly to the federal government. The Hub Zone program is part of a larger effort to address equity through contracting, much of which is managed by SBA's Office of Government Contracting and Business Development, but includes all federal agencies. The Hub Zone program contributes significantly to federal government priorities to strengthen underserved communities by supporting firms that locate their principal office and hire 30% of its employees from distressed communities. Richard said something a little earlier about being a subprime. There is work that our team at GCBD has led the charge on to make sure that minority-owned and Black-owned businesses are no longer just the subprimes. There are opportunities now to be considered the prime, to be first to the table and then decide who your subprimes are going to be. We are empowering families and communities through business. I'm so excited to be here. I look forward to more conversation. Renee, I'm going to kick it back over to you. You know, I could talk about this all day. It is taking a great deal of self-control not to keep going, but I want to leave space for richer dialogue and even for some question and answer. So with that, I'm going to stop. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. And sorry about that, about the visual. We
No
got it
worries.
fixed, but I want to bring Richard back on because I think Richard has a few questions for you.
Okay.
Wonderful. Well, one, I appreciate you gave such an amazing sort of chat around what's really happening at SBA. So I want to thank you for that. I guess
It's my delight, Richard. It's my delight.
I guess my first question for you is, I mean, I think there's so many folks out there, and I've been looking at some of the questions here. There's so many folks out here really trying to figure out, you know, they're a new business, they've started up, they might provide technology services, they might provide food services. How do they sort of begin the process? What are some of the top things they need to do to prepare themselves to apply for a government grant, a government contract?
I'm going to leave some space for Tanika, who is our expert on government contracting, to dig deeper in that. But one of the things that I want you to know are resources that we're bringing to the community level to really answer those questions. One of the easiest things you can do is go on our website and look at our array of resource centers right near you. So you're not hearing from me. I may be millions of miles away from you, but right in your community, there should be a resource where you can walk into one of our district offices, one of our resource centers, one of our small business development centers, a SCORE chapter, a women's business center, and now we've built community navigators. This was a Biden priority, and we are, let me tell you, so honored, over the moon, that he chose to place this priority program in the SBA. It is a pilot program that says, can we build, just as the name says, a group of community navigators to help connect business people to the products and services of the SBA and help them what? Navigate the space. It's a hub and spoke model where we fund the hub and the hubs then fund spokes throughout this country. Our focus is on Black-owned business, Hispanic-owned business, women-owned business, vet-owned business, and rural communities. Does that mean if you feel like you don't fit any of those designations that you don't get help to? Absolutely not. But it's a real drive towards equity through community navigators, because these are often the groups that feel the most disenfranchised and out of the typical conversation and out of peer groups that can lead them to the next step. So on our website, when you type in community navigators, there is a locator map that can help you map through and see if there's a community navigator near you. You can also then see what resource centers are near you. We are trying to make it intuitive and easy for families to get help.
Now, Deidre, I'm so happy you brought that up, right? Because and you talked about the word equity, because I swear every time I get on my social media, every time I post a video on Instagram, or I post a video on Twitter or on LinkedIn, and or one of my, and we're having this conversation about equity, right?
Yes.
One, I think people get the definitions misconstrued, but two, people always say, well, but what is it? What's equity? What? And they get the definitions confused. But I want to have a real conversation with you around
Please.
How do we level the playing field, right? Which is what equity is making sure that you give the folks who need the resources so they could play at the same level as those who have the resources, right? For Black-owned business and minority-owned businesses, and what is the administration as well as the SBA doing to make sure that we level that playing field for all the folks on this call and all the folks around the country who want to be entrepreneurs, who want to do business with the federal government, who are currently doing business with the federal government and wants to do more business with the federal government?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question, because I thank you for your definition of equity. It is a leveling. It is and I do talk with my hands a little bit. So when I was doing my rising tide, Richard, you should know I too am Jamaican, so I can't help but talk with my hands.
Same.
So first generation as well. But when you talk about a rising tide, if you have the lowest boat here and you start your program here, you're just drowning the people at the bottom. You're not lifting them up. But when you start your program here, that tide lifts everyone up. And eventually this boat, oh my gosh, it starts to catch up. And what a beautiful thing, because it makes our infrastructure as a country, our business infrastructure as a country, that much richer. It is not about me or you. It really is about us. It is about our access. Look at the supply chain. There's a real opportunity for small businesses to fill these gaps in supply chain. And anybody waiting for an Amazon package that should have been here a long knows what I'm talking about. Our administrator talks about the accidental exporter. So I'm going to give you here's another opportunity for diversity and equity. Small businesses make up 97% of exporters. That's huge by itself. Wait, I'm ready to blow your mind, and I don't think I'm overselling. Here I go. You ready?
I'm ready to be blown. I'm waiting for my.
Are you ready to be blown away?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Small businesses, 97% of exporters. Only 1%, Richard, of small businesses export. So we are responsible for more than the bulk. Most of the exports that leave the US are done by small businesses, but only 1% of us do it. Do you know what an opportunity for economic growth and for the stabilization of the US economy if more of us were exporting? That's what COVID showed us. When our doors closed and people started putting their products online, all of a sudden they didn't know who was buying them. And now all of a sudden their products that they used to sell to their neighbor or maybe the county over were going overseas. There is a huge opportunity. And at every corner of the SBA, we are thinking about everybody in the country. Black exporters, we talk to other countries when we meet with other delegations. We talk about the facts. What are you doing for our diaspora business people that are from your country? I don't care if it's Italy. I don't care if it's Jamaica. I don't care if it's an African, Arab. The conversation always turns back to, what are you doing for our businesses? And we have people, because we're a nation of immigrants, we have people that their original country was your country. Are you doing business with them? That is how we're thinking about leveling in every corner of the SBA. And
I'm so glad you brought that up. A moment of personal privilege. I'm finalizing a story as Renee said. I'm a writer at Forbes magazine, and I'm working a story about Jamaican food and the impact that it's having in America, right? And I think what's so interesting about it, and I would love just to get your take on this, is that people don't realize that the federal government does business in pretty much everything. So I mean, this is not on my question list, but I'm just curious, what is the most peculiar thing that the federal government contracts?
Oh my God. Oh, Tanika may know. I don't know. We are having, oh my God. I love it. Oh my God. I wish I had the answer because I don't think I have the most peculiar. I know we do everything. We contract everything from food to services. I know soon we'll be having a conversation about Colombia and coffee. We'll be having a conversation. There isn't a thing. I mean, there's somebody that is supplying mittens and gloves to the government. There's someone we have this huge childcare initiative that we're thinking about. How do we create more childcare businesses? That's a government contract. Who provides care for the children of government work? There isn't a corner of life, from cleaning the building to supplying the furniture to where we get the food. Should we be looking for a Jamaican contractor? I love some Ackee and Saltis.
If you read my story, you might find some Jamaican contractors.
A multi-ethnic cafeteria would be amazing. So a taste of America would be amazing. So from food to services, there's nothing that we're not contracting for.
Somebody brought, Renee said pens, socks.
Pens, socks.
Everything is procured. Now, another question for you. What else do small businesses need to know about SBA's work with the Black community?
That you need to know we're open for business. You need to know this is for you. You need to know there's no question or inquiry that's too small. You need to know that we are leaning into customer service. Sometimes people don't know because they don't ask, and they don't ask because they're afraid. They're afraid of inhospitality and being made to feel silly. There is no silly question, not when you are about to, don't let fear of asking a question stop you from being dynamic. There's also really no bad time to start a business. I'm in the DMV, the DC metro area, and I was down at National Harbor maybe a weekend or two ago. There were so many Black businesses that hadn't been there before. There was a yoga studio, and I went in, and it was just I just poked my head in because I poke my head into small businesses. And she said, "Hey, I've been teaching yoga in Alexandria." And I said, "It's just time." And I got this space, prime real estate on the front corner of the National Harbor, where tourists and residents pass by all the time. Now it's a Black business owner holding that space. Mahogany bookstore, Furlough cheesecakes started while on a government furlough, baking cakes out their house. Ellen, they go viral. And what does Ellen give these Black women when she says you're great and I want to see your business survive? She gives them a check. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about that at the SBA, access to capital. We're not talking about symbolic gestures, they're important, but we're talking about real change. Now, can I tell you just one last story, Richard, before Renee comes in and like yanks us out of here?
Please. I'm a storyteller, so I love a good story, I promise.
So no business is too small, and you are not too young, nor are you too old to be a business person. So my grandmother put kids through school. My grandmother and grandfather, my grandfather was deceased. My grandmother was living with one of my aunties. It was like a very big success story. My auntie has a big job and was doing big things, and her mother was living with her, and she was taking care of her mom, and just massive success story. And one day a coworker of my aunt said, I'll be by your house later on today to pick up my Easter bun, so a pastry, and my fruitcake. And my aunt said, why in the world would you be coming to my house to pick up your Easter bun and fruitcake? And the woman said, because I buy them from your mother. My grandmother had set up a business in my aunt's house, unbeknownst to her, selling Easter pastries to all my aunt's friends, unbeknownst to my aunt, with the help of the aid worker who was helping take care of her. She said, no, girl, let's go into business. And they were making cakes and pastries and selling them. It's never too late. You are never too old to go into business. If we had been thinking, and maybe if I had been a little older, I would have thought, how do we maximize the operation? How do we expand? And how do we get her an accelerator to make sure that this business continues for generations? But let's start thinking that way. Let's start taking our thoughts and our good ideas out of the kitchen, off the dining room table, and use the resources and access that SBA gives you to expand and to really live your dream as an entrepreneur to its height. That would be my deepest desire. And I'm really grateful to have been here today, Richard. And I hope we talk again.
Oh, we should definitely talk again. And there's so many questions in the Q&A. And I will say this, as somebody who was a small business, who, like I said, my first contract was it wasn't a federal contract, but it was a government contract. There's so much information out there, Deirdre, that people can get. They can go to sba.gov. They can go to your Twitter handle at sba.gov, your Instagram handle at sba.gov.
We'll put them in the chat.
And we'll put all of those in the chat. And folks can find out so much information about what's required, all the resources that you guys have, all the COVID-19 resources. I'm also going to post some of your stuff on my IG, so folks will find it there at Richard A. Fowler. But there's so much information that you guys put out to the public. So there's so many questions here that I'm looking in the chat that can literally be answered by going to sba.gov. I'm going to put it in my story. I'm going to post it on my feed so folks know how they can find out information right there on your website. So thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure to be with everybody and with all of you wonderful folks.
Thank you.
I'll turn it back over to you, Renee.
Thanks, guys. Wow. I mean, you guys can start your own podcast right now. Like the SBA and Richard Fowler, they're starting a podcast. You heard it first here about Black History Month and small business. I don't know. I will watch and listen. Well, now we're going to go to the amazing Tanika Pierce, who's going to talk about the overview of government contracting, a one-on-one, and going into those details about what Richard and Deidre were talking about. And just a little background about Tanika. She is responsible for developing and implementing policies pertaining to the procurement assistance mission of the Small Business Administration. As such, she formulates and establishes standards, procedures, and direction of the agency's prime contracts and subcontracts programs to meet the existing and potential needs of the small business community. Additionally, she promotes these programs on a nationwide basis to encourage and increase the participation of small businesses to secure government contracts and subcontracting opportunities. And with that, I'm so excited to introduce to you all the amazing Tanika.
Well, thank you all for having me. I was just delighted. I was sitting here in awe and just enjoying the conversation between Richard and Deidre. They have shared so much good information that's so pertinent. And I'm just so honored to be a part of this cast. And what I'm going to do is I'll go through my slides very quickly because they touched on so many very important things about government contracting. And I know most of you just want to know the nuts and the bolts and the basics on how to get a government contract, how to get started in government contracting. So Deidre, I'm sorry, this next slide. So the purpose of government contracting and what I do is we ensure that a fair portion of government contracts is placed in the hands of small businesses. And that includes women-owned small businesses, hub zones, veteran-owned, service-disabled vet, and then your typical small disadvantage along with your, they call it the quote unquote vanilla small business, where if you don't fall into any of those other socioeconomic categories. And you guys are resources. You promote our industrial base, and without small businesses, our economy would definitely fail. Okay, next slide. So what in the Office of Government Contracting, there are two areas that we are directly involved in getting businesses the government contracts, and that's on the prime contracting side and the subcontracting side. If you're a prime contractor, that means you have gone out and you have been directly awarded a contract by the government. If you're a subcontractor, you've gone out and that prime contractor, which could be a small business or a large business, but they've been given opportunities and they need to have someone else perform certain functions. So they subcontract it out. That's on the subcontracting side. And that's typically with our large businesses like a Lockheed Martin, Balfour Beatty's, NASA, well, NASA's a federal government agency, but all the large prime contractors. Next slide. So the Office of Government Contracting is located in 6 different areas. So their primary location in the DC area will be considered Area 2. I am located in the Area 5 area, which is the Rocky Mountain region and the southern Texas, southwestern states. And then you have Area 6, which is the West Coast. So it's geographically based. And so that's where we have what we call, next slide. That's what we have, where we have procurement center representatives that directly sit at agencies and work with federal agencies, commercial market representatives, which work directly with the large prime businesses. And then we have certificate of competency specialists who are there, say you are awarded a contract, but the contracting officer does not know if you can perform based on financial capabilities or key personnel. They will investigate and determine whether or not you are viable for that contract if you're the apparent successful awardee. The size determination program is very important because the small business community, large business, you guys do an absolute wonderful job in policing and making sure that those large firms aren't getting those contracts or misreporting or misrepresenting themselves. So a size determination specialist, say you want to protest a contract that's been awarded, You could say this firm is not a small, they're not a woman-owned, HUBZone, what have you. We go in, we look at it, we make a determination. And many times to date, I know we've probably put at least 50 million plus back into the hands of small businesses. And that's just for maybe a base year. That's not the option years. And then we also have, so those are our programs, and we can go to the next slide. I want to make sure we get through all of them. Okay, next slide. So this is what you would work with a PCR, a procurement center representative. They work directly hand in hand with the small business specialist, and they make sure that you as a small business are being considered for those contracts. Set asides if they want to, if there's something that they deem adverse to small businesses, say the location or the time that the request for quote was put out, they'll make sure that it is not restrictive to small businesses. And if there is an issue, we as government contracting can issue what they consider a formal 70. And that's when a contract and procurement it can be appealed all the way to the level of the Office of the Secretary of that agency. Okay, next slide. Next slide, that's the subcontracting program. Next slide. And so this is the commercial market representative. As I stated before, they work hand in hand with the large businesses. When they are awarded a contract, they're required anything over 750K or for commercial products, they are required to have a subcontracting plan. And we ensure that we hold their feet to the fire for what they said that they would do as for subcontractors. So that means if they said they were going to contract to veterans, to small disadvantaged businesses, to 8A firms, they have to do that. Okay, next slide. The certificate of competency program, I won't get all into the dynamics of that, but just know that there's an option if you have been awarded a contract and we got dark in here because nobody was moving. Sorry about that. They just cut off after a while. But it could be based, say you're responsive, you've responded to the solicitation, but the contracting officer doesn't have the warm and fuzzies that you can perform. They can refer you to the Office of Government Contracting in the area where the firm is located. So it could be any one of those 6 areas that you saw on the previous slides. Okay, next slide. This is more for the contracting officer. If it's referred to us and we deem that you are acceptable and that you can be awarded the contract, they have to award it to you. And they can't go on to the next one unless we say that you as a firm, there may be some concerns and we don't think it's in your best interest, because the point of the certificate of competency program is to ensure that you will be successful. So SBA does not want to set the firm up and put them in a situation where they may not realize that they don't have the resources or the key personnel available. We will make that decision so that we make sure that you are successful in those contracts. Okay. Next slide. And that's just what I stated, award, you'll have to be awarded the contract. Okay, next slide. If there are CLC referrals, there's based on the states, this is where they will be sent to. And this is not of your concern. This will be more of a contracting officer's concern. So don't worry about writing those names and emails and points of contact. Don't worry about that. Okay, next slide. And this is one of the reasons what I talked about earlier about why size is so important. It's related to being legitimate small businesses and ensuring that there's an even playing field. We don't want instances of ostensible subcontracting where you have a large business and they're working with you as a small business, and then you need to do all the work. We don't want them to get credit for a contract that they're supposed to be doing all the work on, and then the small business is doing it. So just leveling the playing field and making sure that everything is equitable. Okay, next slide. So just points of what you are as a small business. You have to be organized for profit in the United States. And your size, that may be a question that you may or may not have, but how do you determine if you're a small business? Well, it's based on your NAICS code, which is the North American Industrial classification system code. And this is the business that your businesses primarily operate in. So whatever you do, 50% or more, you can always have more than one, but this is how we determine your size. It's based on revenue or it's based on employees. And you can find that information on what your size is on the SBA website. If you just look up size standards or size affiliations. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay, we talked about this is revenue or employees, so it's your average annual receipts for the last 5 years now. On January 6th, it's changed to the last 5 years, or the number of employees. Okay, and that's for the 12 calendar months preceding. Okay, next slide. That's for protests. The CEO would forward any protest that they had to the Cognizant area office. So this is just so you understand the procedure, but you don't have to know all of this information here. Okay, next slide. And you can, well, if there's an unsuccessful offer and it's been protested, the contracting officer has to wait before they make an award. And that's essentially what they're saying. You have to wait 5 days before they can make the award. And typically it takes 15 days before a size determination is made. And sometimes requests for extensions are granted based on the time of year, because at the end of the 4th quarter, it could be very busy and we may need an extension. Okay, next slide. And these are the areas, again, like I said, this is based on the contracting officer will need to know this information, not you per se, but it's based on the headquarters of where the firm is located to where that protest or that size determination would be sent to. Okay, next slide. And next slide. I tried to go through it as quickly as I could. There was so much information that I wanted to share with you guys. I think so you have more time for questions. I think the main thing that you need to know is be registered in SAM.gov, register in SAM.gov, know your NAICS code, determine what your NAICS code is. And now you have to have the unique entity identifier number that used to be your DUNS number. When you go in SAM.gov, that is where you can look at solicitations, you can find out who's buying what you're selling, and you can market to those agencies. So that's in a nutshell about government contracting. I've just condensed it as much as I could.
No, and the great thing, Tanika, is this presentation we're going to also email to those who registered today. So if you registered, you're going to get an email. So we'll have the actual link, where you can review and see this, which is on the SBA's Facebook page too, because this is also on Facebook Live right now. So that's the amazing technology, that world that we live in today. So people can review this and they can stop, pause, write down information as they're going through it. So that's the beauty of those amazing slides that you made. Couple quick questions, because I know there are a ton of questions, and we're not going to be able to get through them all because this does end at 3. So I do apologize to everyone out there. We are not able to talk about PPP. We are not able to talk about EIDL. We're not able to talk about COVID EIDL. This is all about contracting and procurement. So I just want to clarify that, because I see there's quite a few questions here about that. Step 1, if you live in a rural area, where should you go if you have a question about getting started with contract and procurement?
Just like what Deirdre said earlier, go to SBA and look at your local resources that are near you. There's so many small business development centers, procurement technical assistance centers that help you directly get started with not just your business, but government contracting itself. So identify them. They often have classes that are online, sessions that you can attend just like today via Zoom, so you don't have to leave. So I definitely recommend starting there.
And pretty much every region has an office where people can be able to connect to the SBA locally. And there's newsletters and emails that they send out for those classes. So you can sign up, register, and get more information about those. Because I know I signed up and I see them like every other day, that there's like a contract and procurement class, or if you're a veteran-owned business and you want to learn more about contracting, you could do that. So those options exist, right, Tanika?
Exactly. In your local district office, usually there's one in every metropolitan area that's near you. There's a SBA district office. There are a plethora of resources and information that you can use. So definitely connect with them as well.
Amazing. And for those, Jessica, who is with the SBA, did drop into the Q&A. If you are looking for questions, answers to your questions about IDA or PPP, you can reach out to your local SBA office and they can check on your application. Just go to sba.gov/local-assistance and you'll be able to get some assistance there. So just want to put that out there. Another question, Tanika, that I'm seeing a lot of is I have a consulting firm or professional services. Am I able to then do government contracting? Will I be able to provide services to the government that way?
Absolutely. There are staffing firms, consulting firms. They provide contracting officers, contract specialists. There a need for education sessions and people to provide training. Absolutely. What I recommend is that you get registered in SAM.gov, put in your NAICS code and find out who is buying what you're selling. There are opportunities there, but one of the things that I always find is that they say, I just want a government contract anywhere. I'll take anything. You have to market. You have to, it's still a business. You still have to work it. They're not going to just land in your lap. So you have to do the footwork yourself also to understand you may not be able to sell NASA, childcare services, but you may be able to sell childcare services for a base that's a base contracting service at Andrews Air Force Base. You have to see who's buying what you're selling.
That's very true, because there's always someone that's going to buy something that you are selling. That's why you are in a business. You're fixing a need or a void that someone has. If there's someone who wants to help with affordable housing, is that something the government can help with as well in doing contract and procurement?
And so when you talk about affordable housing, you need to check out HUD because they deal with housing. So you have to see if they have opportunities there for you. So I would look at agencies like HUD.
Okay, that makes sense, right? If you're thinking about it. So you think through what services you have, think about what agencies exist and what those agencies serve and how they do it, and how you can possibly connect, and then go from that way as part of your plan to execute on how to connect for contracting purposes. That makes sense. Okay, I've seen the dots that you're connecting here. That makes a lot of sense. Another question we have a lot of, and I think this will be our last one because we are at time, is exporting. Now, we talked a lot about contracting and procurement. What about exporting? Does the SBA do anything, or does your office connect people to resources to help them export?
Our office, the Office of Government Contracting, does not, but we have an exporting section in SBA. They work directly to get you started from getting your product from A to Z. If that's in China, if it's in Turkey, they're here. They actually work around the corner from me. So they are available, and their resources are available on the SBA.gov website as well. Just type in exporting and you're going to see a plethora of information coming to you.
Wow, well, that is amazing. And I think that makes sense for us to say that this webinar series makes sense because these resources, opportunities that we're trying to make sure people understand are available. I mean, maybe exporting is step 2 in this webinar series that we're bringing people, right?
Right. And just before, like I know what Deidre and Richard was saying, what I see is that there's the access to information and knowledge and understanding how to navigate through the system.
That's right.
Once you can figure that out and you use the resources that are free that you have, you can navigate through it.
That's right. That's right. And one last thing, because I want to make sure people understand this, because it's the 2 major things I think people want to make sure are clear. SAM.gov, NAICS codes. Can we find the websites? And is it SAM.gov?
It
And
stands for, okay, the acronyms, you know, we have all the acronyms. So it stands for System for Acquisition Management, sam.sam.gov. And then your NAICS code, North American Industrial for Classification System Code, NAICS. Those are the things that you need so to register and do business with the government.
well, guys, you heard it first from Tanika, the all-knowing contractor procurement queen bee in area 5 of the southern region of the SBA. And we want to say thank you so much, Tanika, for all the information you provided us today. Again, those slides will be made available. You could go to the SBA Facebook page to rewatch this. We'll be sending this out in email as well. We want to thank Deidre, Richard Fowler as well for being part of this amazing conversation today in celebration of Black History Month. So stay tuned because, you know, next month is Women's History Month. So that means, you know what, we got to celebrate because why not? And we're excited to continue bringing these resources and opportunities to engage with the SBA. And I'm just excited to say that we're kicking off the series and there's more to come. So stay tuned and we will be seeing you. And if you have any questions, just hit us up at events@publicprivatestrategies.org. And then also, if you are looking to connect with the SBA, it's answerdesk@sba.gov. And with that, we will send it off and see you all next time. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.